Welcome to the How-To WordPress webinar. My name's Rick and I'll be your host for the webinar. The How-To WordPress webinars are designed to take you beyond the step-by-step tutorials that we feature on the How-To WordPress website. The webinars tend to focus on bigger topics, whether they be strategy or processes. Today's webinar is going to look at installing and configuring the WordPress CMS. We're going to be looking at the process that's involved in that. And while a lot of these things are explained step by step inside the site, I thought it'd be nice to take you through the process and let you actually watch somebody do it. I've built a ton of WordPress websites over the years, and along the way I'm going to give you some of the tips and tricks that I've learned over these years, and hopefully, make your installation process a little more painless and a little more effective too. Now, what are we going to be looking at? Well, specifically, our agenda today looks like this. We're going to look at obtaining the WordPress installation package. Then we're going to look at getting those files on your server. In this case, I'm going to be using a local development server, but it's really no different if you're using a live web host, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Next, we're going to look at creating a database, and I'm going to show you how that's done. Then we're going to run the installer and step through all of that together. And then we're going to take a first look at the administration interface, sort of a guided tour of the admin interface. And then finally, we're going to go through the steps of a basic configuration. At the end of all this, you should have WordPress set up on a server and configured and ready to go. In a subsequent webinar, we'll look at things like getting started with creating your blog, a plugin suite that you may want to install, and doing things like creating an About Us page and a contact page. But all that is for another day. So let's go ahead now and get ready to jump into the topic for this month. Okay, the first thing that we need to do is we need to obtain the installation package. That is the files that we need to put on the server to install WordPress. And to do that, we're going to go to the website for WordPress, which is wordpress.org. Notice that's wordpress.org, not wordpress.com. WordPress.com is the hosted blogging site. .org is the open source CMS project. Once we land on that page, look for the Download WordPress button and click that. Then look for the Download button again, and let's go ahead and grab this package. They're going to ask us where we want to put it. I'm going to go ahead and drop it on my desktop and click Save. Now, while that happens, let's look at something else here. I'm downloading right now a .zip file. That is a compressed file archive. It contains all of the installation files we need. But if you prefer, you can actually download a tarball. That's a .tar.gz. That's also a compressed file format. Really pick whichever one you're more comfortable with. They both contain the same files exactly. It's just a different compression format. Makes no difference which one you use. Okay, our download is finished, so let's go ahead and move on to the next step, which is to open up that zip file, and here it is on my desktop. I'm going to double click on that. Everyone should have decompression software already installed in their computers. It pretty much comes from the factory these days. You shouldn't have to install anything, but if you do, just go Google, unzip software, and you'll find something you can use. Okay, it's done, and there is the directory. And let's just look inside that for a second. All of these files are the installation files for WordPress. Right now they don't do anything because they're not sitting on a server and they're not attached to a database. So we're going to take the next steps to make that happen. I just wanted to show you what's inside there. And that folder, by the way, was the contents of that zip file. All right, now we've got our installation files, so let's move on to the next step. And that basically means getting those files onto your server. Now, in this demo, I'm going to be setting up a development server, that is a local installation. And the software that I use for that is called Mamp. Mamp is a free software package you can install on your Macintosh and other systems as well, and includes all of the things that you would find on a web host server, MySQL database, PHP, everything you need to run a website locally without having to put it on a remote server and connect to it over the internet. Now, why do I do this? Well, it's real simple. It's a practical matter. If I've got the website on my local machine, I don't have any latencies, any delays, any problems with internet connections, none of those things. Everything moves much faster, in other words. So when I'm first building a website, I'll almost always build it on my local machine using a development server. Then later, once it's done, I'll deploy that. I'll move all those files and I'll move that installation onto the web server and make the site live and publicly accessible on the internet. That's a topic for another day. We're not going to go there right now. We're going to set this up on our local dev server. I would note, however, that if you are actually installing on your web host now, the steps are pretty much exactly the same. It's just I'm going to be using my local machine as a server instead of a remote machine. One note before we go any further. A lot of web hosts these days, they offer automated installers. For example, Fantastico is one of the most common ones you'll see out there. Those are really easy to use. I mean, you just simply go into your web hosting control panel and say, set up WordPress, and it does it for you. But generally speaking, I don't like to use those. The reason is a bit technically arcane. It has to do with the permissions that are assigned to the directories and the files that are created when you do that. What I've found in my experience is that sometimes when I get into customizing a site, sometimes there are things that I want to do that I find I'm blocked from doing because the permissions for those directories, I don't own them. The permissions are instead owned by the Fantastico installer, and that blocks me from doing certain things. So if you're not going to be doing heavy customization, fine, go ahead, use an automated installer. It'll save you a little bit of time. But if you are going to be customizing your site, or if you're a developer who's just getting into this, let my experience be your guide. Don't make the same mistake I've made. Stay away from those things. Do it yourself. If you do it yourself, you really generally don't have any of those problems. Okay, now back to our topic. That is, how do we get these files onto our development server? Well, if you're running Mamp or one of the other packages like XAMPP, and there's one called WAMP as well, they all do the same thing and they all work the same way. You need to move these files that you've unzipped here from WordPress into a directory that it's going to use as the root for the installation for the server. And in the case of Mamp, that's a directory called htdocs. So if I go to htdocs, all I need to do is drag this folder over there. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to drop that folder into the htdocs directory. If I open up htdocs, I see it. There it is. It's WordPress. Now this is an important point. Whatever you name this directory is the address that you're going to use to access this site on your development server. So I don't want to name it WordPress. That's a bit generic and it's going to get in my way with other things. So I'm going to name it WP4 Demo. Now you need to remember that. You're going to need it later. So there it is, WP4 Demo. Now we've accomplished our second step, which is we've got the files onto the server. Now we need to create a database. WordPress has to have a database, and it's something you have to do yourself. The system won't do it for you automatically. I'm going to show you how to do it in Mamp, and here we go. I'm going to go down and I'm going to start Mamp. I'm going to open that up. When the Mamp dialog appears, I'm going to click Start Servers. Watch up here. You'll see these lights turn green, or these boxes turn green. Okay, MySQL server is started. Now we're waiting on Apache to start. Once Apache starts, yes, that means it's started. It's jumped me over here to my browser, and it's opened up the landing page for Mamp. So here we are on the landing page for Mamp. This just basically tells you your servers are running, and it gives you access to some tools. One of those tools is what we use to create the database, and it's right here. It's phpMyAdmin. So let's go up and select that. That's going to open a phpMyAdmin interface. And now if you're working on your web host, you'll use phpMyAdmin on your web host as well. It's going to look exactly the same. It's the same tool all the way around. Now what do we need to do here? We need to create a database. So we go to the Databases tab. There they are. And here's the Create Database field. So let's give our database a name. And I'm going to call it WP4 Demo just for the sheer sake of being consistent. And all you need to do now is click Create. These default options, collation, are correct. So click Create. Bingo, we're done. There's your confirmation message. Now, we've accomplished all of the key steps we need to accomplish before we run the WordPress installer. That is, we've obtained the installation files, we've unzipped them, we've moved them to the server, and we've created a database for the installer to use. Now it's time to run the installer. I'm going to go ahead and close a couple of tabs here just to make life simpler, and I'm going to get rid of this thing too. All right, in Mamp, you need to know the address to go to set things up. So I'm going to clear off everything. That's your root address, localhost :8888/. Now you enter the name that you gave that directory, in our case WP4 Demo. That's going to be the address of those installation files, and hit return. There we go. This is the beginning of the WordPress installer. Now notice you have an option here immediately to choose, which is what language do you want to use, and it's pretty complete. Some of these will prompt you to download some additional information, but the English United States version is what's packed by default. All you need to do, if that's what you want, is click Continue. Now, it reminds you need to know a few things. You need to know the name of the database that we just created. You need to know the username for your database and the password for your database. You also need to know the name of the database host, and this is optional. If you want to use a table prefix, you can set one. So, when we come in here, we need to know our database name, the username and password, and the host name. All of this basically tells us, hey, we also need a wp-config.php file, but don't sweat it. If you don't have one, the system will typically automatically create it for you, so it's really not an issue. So let's click the Let's Go button and let's see what happens. There we are. It tells us we need, this is the page where we put in the database information. Sorry. What do we need to do? Our database name, WP4Demo. With Mamp, your username and your password are usually simply root. And your database host name is generally localhost. In fact, when you're on most shared web hosts, this will also be your database host name. And the table prefix by default is WP_. You can change that if you want. There are some slight security improvements if you change it. And if you're running multiple installations on the same database, you need to give each of the installations a unique table prefix so they don't conflict. But we don't have any of those issues, and we're trying to keep it simple today, so we're just going to go ahead and use the default value and click Submit. Now the system's going to check and see if the information is correct, and yes it is. All right, Sparky, we're ready to go. So let's run the installer, and off we go. WordPress has done the work, and it's asking us for some additional information now. So we need to give our site a title. Don't sweat this because you can change it later. I'm going to call it the WordPress 4 demo. Here's where you set an username for your first user, your super user. Now I strongly advise don't use the default admin. I'm going to use WP4 demo space admin just to make it a little more complex. The password they give you is nice and strong, but it's also really tough to use, and on your development server you don't need to worry about security so much. So hey, use something you can remember on your development server. If we're on our live site on a public address, we want to use a much stronger password than what I just typed in. Since I am using a very weak password, and again I'm accepting the risk because it's on my development server, nobody sees it but me, there's no risk. It wants you to confirm this. Then it wants you to give an email address, and this email address is going to be associated with this username, in this case WP4demo space admin, and it's going to become the default email address of the website as well. Again, don't sweat it, you can always change this later. I'm going to use that one. The last choice says, do we want to allow search engines to index this site? If you're on a dev server, this makes no difference. You're not connected to the internet. If you're on a web host, well, you need to make a decision whether this is what you want right now. If the site is under development, you want to deselect that, and once the site's finished, then you select it. But again, right now, since we're on dev server, it doesn't matter. I'm going to click Install WordPress. And the wheels go round and round, and there we have it. That's all there is to it. It's done. It's installed. It's beautifully simple. WordPress has got this right. So now it's done. It says, hey, don't forget, here's your username, and you chose the password. So what do you want to do now? Do you want to log in? Yeah, let's log in. Let's look at the back end of the website. And I chose WP4 demo, and really lame password, and click login, and there is the back end of the website. That is the WordPress dashboard. Now at this point in time, I'm going to switch around my browser situation, and let me explain to you why. I went ahead and I ran the installer using Chrome, but to make this webinar a little simpler, I'm going to split this up and I'm going to use two browsers. So I'm going to use Chrome actually for the front end of the website. So let's go ahead and log out. And let's go back and let's see the front end of the website. There it is. That's the default theme that's installed with WordPress 4. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go use Firefox, and I'm going to open up the back end of the website on Firefox. So I'm typing in that URL. There we go. That's the front end of the website. Now you can access the administration system in the login screen by either using the login option under the meta box, or you can type in simply wp-login.php. Now, that's a mouthful to remember. So you know what I always do, and this is just a bit of a shortcut. I just remember wp-admin. Don't have to remember a file extension or anything. And what happens if you go to that address and you're not logged in is it automatically flips you over to the login screen. So, hey, I just use wp-admin. That's just me. I'm trying to keep it simple. wp4demo space admin. There we go. And my password. Hit return. Let me log in. Yes, please remember that, WordPress. And bingo, there's the back end. So now what I've done, and I do this a lot during development, typically with two screens, with my computer and a second screen. I put the front end on one browser, and I stay logged out so I can see what the general public would see. And then I use the back end on a different browser. So here we have Chrome with the front end logged out. So this is what an unauthenticated visitor to the site would see. And then on the back end, I'm using Firefox. I'm logged in. I can make my changes. I can check them easily just by refreshing that other page. All right, let's go ahead now and take a tour of the admin dashboard and the whole admin system. This, like I say, is your landing page, and it's called the dashboard. This little top thing here is really designed to make it easy for you to get started with WordPress. You know, these are sort of first steps that you may want to take. That's fine and everything. It's great that they're trying to help us out, but I'm going to get that off the screen because I'm going to do it my way. And on top of that, you know, you're only going to use that once the first time you set up the site, and I want to show you what your dashboard looks like in the normal circumstances. This is your normal dashboard. These boxes here are actually called widgets. And the default set of widgets is the At a Glance widget, which tells you basically what's on the site right now. And right now it has one post, one page, one comment, and it's running a theme called 2015. This will change as you add pages and posts and people make comments to the site and you put it on a different theme. So it's basically literally at a glance, a big picture of the site. Below that is an activity report. So what has recently happened on this site? What have you published recently? Do we have any recent comments? And you can actually administer the comments you see here as well. When I move the mouse over, I get these options. Again, this changes over time as you do things. The top right widget is the quick draft widget, which allows you to very quickly create a draft of a post. We'll talk about that another day, but you know, basically this is a great little tool for capturing ideas and taking notes. It's not actually very useful for publishing things because it won't actually publish it. It'll just save a draft of it. Below that, we have the WordPress News Box, and this is a news feed from WordPress. This is the most recent events that they've posted on the WordPress site into their news feed. Now, this is real nice and everything, but you know, it's not terribly useful to us as site owners. Moreover, since your site has to go off and grab this information from the internet every time you log into the admin system, it actually takes up bandwidth and takes up time, and it slows down the loading of the admin interface. You know what I do? I go up here to Screen Options and I click this. This shows me all of the widgets that are here. I get rid of that. That basically takes that off the screen and removes that delay that we get from having that on there. And you remember that first box that I closed? That's that welcome box. Here it is, right? I got rid of it here by clicking dismiss. I can also get rid of it there. If you want to see it again, bingo. Once you've made any changes here, you can click Screen Options and hide that. The other thing that's neat to know is that you can actually just grab these and click on them and move them around. So if you want to reorder things, you can. Just click it and drag it. Okay. However you like is fine. Whatever makes sense to you is fine. What's interesting is as you add more plugins to the site, oftentimes those plugins come with dashboard widgets, and so your dashboard will tend to get more complex, and it's good to know you can move things around. Okay, that's the dashboard. Over here on the left, we have the main administration navigation, and up here at the top, we have the toolbar. Now let's start with the toolbar. Over here under the WordPress icon, we have links to the official WordPress sites. Under the little home icon in the name of the site, we've got a link that allows us to visit your actual website. So if you click on this, you go to the front end of the website. This tells us how many comments we have and which comments are awaiting moderation. And this is the new box, which is really an accelerator. It lets us very quickly create new posts, add new media to the media library, create a new page, or create a new user. All things that we can do in other locations, but here it's very handy that they give it to us right there at the top. Now over here on the far right, we have the information about the user that's logged in this case the user WP4demo space admin. So howdy WP4demo space admin. This is the information about this user, which in this case, of course, obviously is me. I can edit my profile here, and when I get ready to log out of the system, I can click here and log out of the system. You already saw the Screen Options tab. The Help tab gives you help information about this specific page, which is neat because as you go through different pages, this help information actually changes, and it gives you basically context-sensitive help files, which is really nice. Let's close that. Let's look at the main nav. Over here, we have the dashboard option. It has underneath that two choices, home and updates. If you click on home or you click on dashboard, it takes you right here where we are now to the dashboard. This is the home page, if you will, of the administration system. Finally, updates allows you to see if there are any updates pending for any of your plugins or themes or for the WordPress core. We don't have any pending right now. If there were any pending, you would actually see a number pop up here that tells you how many updates need to be done, and there would also be a warning up here at the top on the toolbar saying that you have updates that you need to do. Stay on top of your updates, people. They make it easy to figure it out and super easy to do. Underneath that, we have posts, media, pages, comments, appearance, plugins, users, tools, settings. Posts is the screen and the options that we use for managing all of the posts in the system. If we click on this, we go to the Posts Manager. We can also click here to add a new post, create categories to group our posts, or manage the tags for our posts. Media is our media library. Every time you upload an image in WordPress, it goes into the media library, which is really cool. That means there's one place that has all of your images, all your videos, all your audio files. Super, super simple. You can either add things when you create a post or a page, or you can come here and you can upload them using the Add New option, which is nice because then you can do bulk uploads. Pages is the Pages Manager, very similar to the Post Manager. This is where you can see all the pages or you can add a new page. Comments is the comment administration interface. If you have comments enabled, this is where you can see them all. Appearance has quite a bit going on. This is where you'll find your themes, the customization link for your themes, your widget management interface, your menu management interface, the options for managing the header, the background for the pages, and a cool little code editor that lets you edit the files in your theme. For example, editing the CSS files and changing the styling. Plugins, this is where you extend the website by adding plugins. You can see all of the plugins that are installed, you can add new ones, and you can search for new ones as well from here, and you can edit the files of your plugins. Users is where you manage all your site users. You can see all the users, you can add a new user, or you can see your own profile here. Tools, these are the utilities that are available. It tells you what tools are here. There's one page here that gives you a list of simple tools, and then you can import and export content as well. Settings, this is your configuration menu. This is where you configure the site as a whole, and we're going to look at this in more detail next. The options here, general, writing, reading, discussion, media, and permalinks. Okay, that's a quick tour of the WordPress administration screen. Again, if I go back and I click home, I'm right back on that dashboard. Now, I want to talk to you about configuration, because once you've installed the site, it's good to go through configuration and tweak everything and set everything like you want it. It's best if you do this at the beginning, though you can do it any time. And if you change your mind, you can do it later. Unfortunately, what happens sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, is if you've made a whole bunch of, or you create a bunch of posts, you've created a bunch of content, you've done a bunch of things on the site, and then you change your settings, sometimes the settings only affect the items going forward, and that means you have to go back and manually change things for those older items you've already created. That's why I always encourage everybody to get the settings and the configuration right up front. If we have to change them later, fine, we can do it. But let's try to avoid that if we can, and let's see if we can get it right now. So let's go through all the options for configuring your WordPress site. They're all located under the Settings menu. Let's go to General. As the name implies, the General tab of the Settings screen has really generic information that affects the site as a whole. For example, this is where we can change the site title. Remember, we gave the site a title when we ran the installer. This is where you can modify it. This is where you can change the site tagline. Now, this shows up sometimes in your search results, and it's associated with the home page, so you may want to modify this some way. This is your website URL. That is where your files are located and how people can get to the site. Okay. This is the email address we entered for the site, the default address. It's also the administrator's address. This is where you control membership. Do you want people to register to the site or not? If you have a membership area, you need to do that. If you don't worry about it. If somebody is allowed to register, what's the default user role? Set your time zone here, and I'll go ahead and make this adjustment right now while I'm here. Set your date format. I'll use the long form date. It's readable by everybody, no confusion. Set your time format. I'm going to use 24-hour time. Set what week, or set what day rather, your week starts on, and set your site language. Once you've made changes here, if you made any, click the Save Changes button, and you'll get a confirmation. Settings saved. Let's go into the Writing tab. Okay, this asks us to set the default post category. Now at this time we haven't set any categories. There's only one category in the system. It's called uncategorized, so we have no options here. Leave that like it is. What's the default post format? Well, post formats is a topic we'll cover another day, but generally speaking, you're going to use standard, so let's use that. This option here labeled Post via Email allows you to set up a way that you can file posts for your website via email. Now, it's a bit of a specialty thing. I mean, do you really want to do that? Well, if you do, you can. You'll have to follow these instructions and set it up here. There's a bit of a security issue associated with this, but, you know, it is manageable if you follow these rules. Let's not worry about it right now. Next is the Update Services dialog. Like it says, when you publish a new post, WordPress automatically notifies the following site update services. In other words, it helps you publicize your posts. Now, the default one is the Pingomatic.com, which is actually a really great one. If you want to use additional update services, you can. There's a list of them right here on the WordPress Codex. For most people, the default values on this page are going to be fine, so you can just leave them like they are. Now let's look at reading. The Reading tab allows us to select what the front page of the website shows. In other words, this is where we can determine what the home page is. Now, in the default installation, if you look back here just a second ago, you see the home page uses this layout, and this layout is actually a list of the posts. In other words, like a blog. This is a chronological list of all the posts on the site. If you don't want that, for example, you wanted to make a really nice landing page that had a big image on it and a splashy marketing message, you could change that by changing this to static page and selecting a page from the front page list. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and show you what that looks like. I'm going to click Save Changes. Okay, there's my confirmation. It's been done. Let's go back to the front end. Now we have to reload this page. And when I reload this page, you see the home page is different. We're still on the home page, but it shows that sample page option that I selected. Now this sample page isn't much to look at, but obviously with a bit of styling, we could make that sample page really nice and make it an appropriate home page. Now, if you have a blog, you also need to select what's going to be the blog landing page. In other words, the posts page for the blog. In this case, we don't have one created yet, so we're just going to leave that blank. Next, we determine how many posts are shown on a single page without, having pagination that says page 1, 2, 3, 4. In this case, the blog pages are going to show at most 10 posts. We can go up and down here all we want. How many posts are going to show in the syndication feeds? That is the RSS feeds. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. Use the default value. Same thing here with for each article in the feed, what do we show? Full text or summary. And here's that search engines visibility thing. Do we want search engines to search this site or not? Again, I'm on a dev server. It doesn't matter. If I was on a live server and I was under development, I would want to discourage the search engines. Okay, I've made changes here, but I already clicked save on that. I haven't done anything else, so I don't need to click save again. Let's go ahead and go to the discussions tab. This one's a bit complicated. Now, this is only relevant if you are going to allow comments on the pages and posts on your site. If you're not going to allow comments, don't even worry about this. Just simply, disable this. Allow people to post comments on new articles. There we go. Boom, it's done. People cannot comment on our articles now once we click save. However, if you want people to comment on any of the articles, go ahead and click this. And note what it says here. These settings may be overridden for individual articles. So in other words, we can turn commenting on and off for individual articles. The things we're doing on this page really affect the comment functionality globally. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. Suffice it to say there's quite a few options here. What do they have to tell you? Do they have to leave a name and an email? Do they have to be registered? Do we want to close comment threads after a certain number of days? How deep do we want the comments to nest? How many comments do we want per page? How do we want to be notified? Do we want to receive an email when a comment's made? Must the comments be approved, or do they go live immediately? You know, there's a lot of options here, which is really great, because if you have an active site, managing spammers and keeping spammers from flooding your comments is an issue, and that's where you set all the things here. We'll talk about comment moderation and how to set up discussions and create engagement. I think we'll make that a topic for a separate webinar. You can also trigger automatic moderation if certain things happen. For example, if they put too many links in a comment, you know, because spammers, a lot of times they'll come in and they'll put in a ton of links in a comment. Same thing here, you can actually block comments that use certain words. So if somebody puts in a comment that uses the word Viagra or penny stocks or something like that, you can put in those phrases and it'll automatically block them. Down at the bottom is something different, which is avatars. When people leave a comment, you can display an avatar along with their name. Click this box that says show avatars. It'll use avatars, and now we can pick what sort of avatars we're going to use. The Gravatar system is sort of a, you know, the most common standard for people that use avatars across multiple sites. So that's usually a good choice here. And then what rating do we want? Well, it depends on the content of your site. If your site is an adult site, okay, fine, let them leave X-rated avatars, in other words, avatars with nudity, etc. On the other hand, if it's open for the general public, let's keep that down at G. Once you're done here, again, click Save Changes. You'll see a confirmation message, and we can move on to media. Okay. This page allows us to set default image sizes for the site. Now, sometimes these values are dictated by the theme that you have installed. In other words, you'll install a new theme, and if you read the documentation, it'll say, hey, you need to adjust your image sizes to the following dimensions. This is where you do that. The default values are here, and for example, thumbnails are 150 by 150, and they're cropped. Okay, if you undo this, it'll display proportional. Okay. What's the medium size? What's the large size? This again is your default image values. You can change this. You can override this in places when you install when you insert individual images. But it's really nice if you get this right, because this is one of those things where if you change it later, you've got to go back and redo everything. And the next question I'd ask you, how do you want to organize the uploads in the media library? And I shouldn't say that. It doesn't organize them in the media library. This is how they're organized on the server. So it'll organize your uploads into month and year-based folders on the server. You won't actually see this in the administration system. It is vaguely useful if you're trying to find something at some point in time, but really this is not a biggie either way. Leave it on, leave it off. Generally speaking, if you don't have a reason to change the default values, use the default values. Okay, the last option under configuration, and this wraps up our configuration discussion, is called Permalinks. Permalinks are better known as search engine friendly URLs. The default URLs in WordPress, like with other content management systems, tend to have query strings in them that indicate interactivity with the database. This would be the default value. It would be, you know, WP4demo/ $P = 123 or something of that nature. But you can choose something that's more search engine friendly and more people friendly. For example, day and name. WP4demo, there's the year, month, day, and then the name of the post. To me, that's really kind of long and clunky. I just typically use post name. And so then we get WP4demo / sample-post. So that's a very straightforward, very human-friendly URL. It keeps the URLs to a reasonable length as well. And it's good for the search engines, so that's a good option. You can create custom structures using these tags. And these tags, there's a link to it right up here. What do they call them? Well, they're simply referring to them as tags. They used to have another name. Anyway, you can look at these tags that are available by clicking here and viewing them on the WordPress Codex. And you can actually create a custom structure if you want. And there are certain rules you have to follow here, so you really do have to read the documentation on it. Most people are really happy with the sample post option, the post name option, that is. Category bases can also be modified here. For example, when a post is inside of a category, you'll see the name of that category. It'll give it like this, WP4demo/topic/uncategorized. If you prefer, you can change that to something else. Same thing with the tags. When somebody clicks on a tag and they see a list of the posts that are associated with that tag, you can affect the URL of that tag base. Now, these are sort of, search engine nuances. If you are being very aggressive about your search engine positioning, you do want to modify the category base, you do want to modify the tag base, and you might even want to look at custom structure. Those are fairly advanced topics, and one of our future webinars will most certainly be talking about search engine strategies, and we'll cover that. Now on this page I've made a change. I've gone from day and name to post name, so I need to click Save Changes. And there's our confirmation. Now let's go back to the dashboard real quick. You'll see none of that configuration I did really affected the dashboard. Let's go back to the front end of the website. I'm going to reload that page. And you'll see, aside from us changing the home page to point to a page instead of our list of posts, none of the things that I did really affected this either. But we have changed the way some things work subtly, and we have impacted the site. And we've improved the site in certain minor ways that will pay benefits for you in the long run. More importantly, if you followed these steps along, you're now ready to start creating content or to install a theme, customize the appearance of the site, install plugins, customize the functionality of the site. In other words, we've laid the foundation that you're going to build the house on top of. And if you followed these steps, you'll be in really good shape to start that process, and that's something we'll definitely handle in subsequent webinars. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thank you all for attending. Please join us next time for our first Tuesday webinar, and in that webinar we're going to look at installing some plugins and creating some content to get started, setting up a blog, creating an About Us page, creating a contact page, and really kicking off your site development and moving on to the next steps. So, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon. See you next time. Bye-bye.